when I think about firearms and suicide, I think of them as two problems that are intrinsically linked and overlapping. I think you can't talk about suicide without talking about guns, and you can't talk about gun deaths without talking about suicide. When you look at suicides as a whole, about 50% are by guns. So across the board, among all suicide deaths, half of them occurred with a firearm. If you flip that statistic and want to look at gun deaths, we know that about 60% nationwide are due to suicide. Where I live in Colorado, about 78% of our gun deaths are suicides. And so they're so closely linked, we've got to talk about them both. And importantly, there are things that we can do to prevent those firearm suicides. Things like counseling and safer storage and working with communities. We think overall, having a firearm in the home increases the risk of suicide maybe about 3 times or so. But what's really important to know is it's not because people who own guns are more likely to be suicidal. It's that in that moment of crisis and maybe impulsivity, a firearm is a very deadly method, is a lethal weapon. That's what it's supposed to be. And so a person who attempts suicide with a gun doesn't usually get a second chance to call for help or to make it to the ER where I can try to do something. So when we talk about reducing access to firearms, or lethal means counseling, or lethal means safety, what that really is this message of putting time and space between someone at risk and the weapon. It could be locking the firearms up so that the person at risk doesn't have access. It could be moving them out of the house. It could be never owning a gun in the first place if it's, you're someone with chronic risk. But again, we're not talking about laws and policies, we're really talking about safe storage. I think the best analogy is probably the drunk driving analogy, that friends don't let friends drive drunk. If your buddy's had too much to drink, you don't call the cops to take away his license, but you make sure he gets home safely. And it's, I think, really the same kind of message.